Right, I'm going to share my screen, but I just want to introduce myself first. My name is Catalina Giannone, and I am a assistant professor in the Modern Languages department. I'm teaching Spanish. I also have a bit of a loss of voice scenario happening right now. I've been traveling for the past 2 weeks. I don't know if it's allergies. I was vaccinated, so I might be doing some throat clearing throughout this. But today I'm going to talk to you all about my experience this past semester trying to use a program or a platform called Scalar in my upper division. Oh, you're already getting a preview of what I'm going to end with in my upper division Spanish course. So I've titled this after the fact, Introducing a Digital Humanities Project in an Undergraduate Spanish Seminar and Lessons Learned. So I'm going to focus on what Scalar is. I know I have a very brief amount of time, so I'm going to focus on what Scalar is, how I used it in my classroom, and kind of what my takeaways are from the experience, and any recommendations I might have for the future. So Scalar is an open source platform for its collaborative scholarship and multimodal composition. Essentially, it is a platform for creating digital books. We have access to it presently through SUNY Create, which is, I guess, Rebecca taught me this, the server on which Scalar is housed. So Scalar is free, but you need a server to use it. And so that's the role of SUNY Create in doing this for instruction. Also, if you wanted to do it for your own research or publishing. So with Scalar, authors, in this case, the students can they can integrate images, videos, and audio clips alongside text as pages in a book. We worked as a class on one book, but I've seen online that others have had their students actually create their own books. And Scalar is unique in the sense that you are publishing every item on the website in a linear way. Everything exists as its own object, and you create the paths and the connections between the items. So it's a platform with a lot of capabilities. And I was learning as I was doing this. But the reason I wanted to do it was because we were in a seminar that was we were talking a lot about different theories of waste, trash, different examples of how the idea of waste is created and cultivated in the Latin American and Spanish context. And so I wanted the students to work with image, text, and all different types of mediums. So that's why I thought Scalar would be a good use. So this is basically what my objective for the semester was to use Scalar, to use this platform so that the students would create a collaborative glossary of terms related to our class's topic, which was waste in the Spanish-speaking world. Originally, since I was learning how to do Scalar as we did this, I guess I didn't realize how much it would take to just teach students how to make a page, right? So I started with some really high goals and just minimized it down to just a glossary. Originally, I was going to have them do some other things, but I just had to really pare it down as the semester went on. And we did succeed in making this collaborative glossary. So in order to do this, I had to have the students, first of all, understand the terms and the subject matter that we were working with, which was just our course material. But at the same time, I was teaching them this new digital skill. So this is the way I sequenced the assignment, and I'll talk a little bit about how it might be better to sequence it differently. So we had weekly readings. My course was an asynchronous hybrid asynchronous synchronous course. So we met on Wednesdays, and they had Monday and Friday assignments. So before the Wednesday session, they had a weekly reading assignment due, for which they had to take a series of structured notes on Google Docs. One of the requirements was to identify key terms from the readings, because we're working through this idea of a glossary. So that they conducted on Google Docs, on one Google Doc. Then at the midpoint of the semester, and then at a second point, because I did terms 1 and terms 2, we compiled all of these keywords in Google Sheets. This happened in 2 sets. After that was an assignment, they submitted all the terms. Essentially, all they had to do was go back to their Google Doc, select the terms that they had identified, and then put it into Google Sheets. Now, that was great because it was really collaborative. A lot of the terms they selected oftentimes just like missed the mark, right? So I was doing a lot of guiding on ultimately what ended up being the terms that were assigned. Then once they compiled the terms, I assigned students terms that they would be writing definitions based on. And I had them draft these definitions on Google Docs. Now, the reason I did this was because once you're on Scalar, you have to do all your editing in Scalar. I think that if someone is to use Scalar in a class that is not as because my students are working in Spanish, where they're not working on language acquisition as well. Really in any class, the issue is going to be how do you want to give the students feedback? What I like about Google Docs is you can track changes, and Scalar doesn't have that feature. I do think they have hypothesis though, or I could have added comments or annotations. So there are definitely ways that one could revise their students' work directly on Scalar, which is just a word processor when they're writing the texts. That I would maybe try in the future, because one of the, I would say, biggest pains was the process where we went from Google to Scalar, that transition. I would say also that gets the students working with Scalar a lot earlier in the semester, so that they're just using one program the whole time and don't have to be transitioning. So if you're going to use Scalar, I would just say, see what you can do about using all of Scalar's features in order to use it the entire semester instead of going from platform to platform. So since I did not do that, my students created and edited their pages on Scalar, which we then had to do in a series where we would have these sessions where I would explain how to use the program. They would go in, have their assignment where they would try to create the pages. And then I would give them revisions, and they would have to go in and fix those revisions. So once they created these pages, the way that we did this was I had dedicated workshops so that I could teach them how you create a page, how you use the different features, and then we would practice those features. They would have small assignments related to that. Again, like I was saying, I think that if I had incorporated Scalar as the main publishing aspect of the entire class, like removing Google Docs, we could have worked out some of the kinks earlier on in the semester. So it wouldn't be as onerous of a task to do the transfer over to Scalar. But what the students did after the workshops was they would create a page, then they would revise the page. Each page, what I had them do was just include 2 forms of media, be it an image or a video, and they also had to caption the media. And then they would post drafts, revise their pages, revise the captions. Now, this seems really simple, just adding an image to text, but Scalar is not simple in that way. Everything exists as its own page, and you incorporate it into your main page. So I had high hopes for what we could do with Scalar, and as it turned out, it was basically them writing a text, adding images and captions. So they were learning a digital skill, but I think, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in my takeaways, that we didn't have the time to really harness like the full power of the program. So I'll give you an example of student work here. So this is one of the students' terms pages. So he has his term here, and I had them put their names. He has his text where he defined his term. He actually did, well, I guess this is one image, 2 images, and the captions. And then I had them do citations and the tags, which I'll get to. That was the last part of the semester. Other students who created pages would have videos in some of the pages instead of images. So the second part of building the book, once we had all these pages, and I would say each student, I had 2 levels in the course. It was $3.95 and $4.95. So at the $3.95 level, each student created a total of 4 pages. And the students at the $4.95 level created a total of 3 pages and 8 pages. It was, I had to change the numbers throughout the semester because it was hard for them. So I started out as going to be 4 pages. I turned it into 3. But what they had to do then was go on Scalar, look at their classmates' pages, and identify different commonalities between entries, key terms that were used, examples that were used. These became our tags around which navigating the book was sequenced. And each student then had to add 3 tags to their pages. And that was how someone would navigate Scalar. So I'll give you an example of a different student's page and the tags that they used. So as you can see, she was playing a little bit more with the formatting options on Scalar. She had her images, her captions, and then these are her tags. So she did economic crisis, click on economic crisis, and you would then see other students who use the same economic crisis. So the idea was to emphasize the way that these different terms connected to one another. And then I generated myself the final web of terms, which you'll see here, which is just a way of visualizing these connections, because really the main thing I was trying to emphasize with these students was how all the different theories and concepts and examples that we had studied throughout the semester connected with one another. Now, I'll talk about how this is just like a basic visualization that you could do in Scalar. It looks more complicated than it is. And then, and you see all the different tags that we created for the project, which were their terms and examples. So lessons learned. I would say the biggest challenges were, I was teaching this course in Spanish. I'm already dealing with students who some are very strong in the language, others struggle a bit more in language. So adding a new technology on top of that, and that is a recipe for a lot of frustration. So I myself had to create all the materials in Spanish to explain how to use Scalar in Spanish, which was difficult. I would recommend, I think that this aspect of the project wouldn't apply to most people because most people are teaching their technology in English, which makes it a bit easier for our students. I'd also say online instruction is really difficult with these programs. I didn't realize it until we got to the part where they were trying to make the pages and I can't see their screens, right? So it would be much easier if we were in a classroom and I could walk around the classroom and look at their screens and make corrections. But it really came down to which students would self-select to ask me for help or which students would come. I did consultation times, which students would actually come and consult with me. Those were the 2 huge challenges. Now, also, this course was extremely low morale across the board. I think it was just the nature of being online again this semester. It was a very challenging course, and then they also were being asked to do this Scalar project. So in the end, the low morale made it a bit more of a slog. But it was interesting because I had them do a reflection afterwards, and most of them in the reflection would make comments like yes, that they were really learning a lot about doing different types of research and saw the value in becoming more literate. I don't know how much of that was just like sucking up to me and hoping that I would think that them expressing interest was a reflection of a higher grade, but low morale made this project more difficult. Another thing, and this is the biggest takeaway I have from this project, is Scalar is a very powerful platform with a lot of different capabilities to do really interesting interactive work, especially since it's open source and it draws on open source publishing. But how much of that in the course of a semester can you really teach the students. So this juxtaposition between the Scalar platform power and what the students really are capable of doing in the course of a semester, especially when it's not a course on Scalar, it's a course on Latin American and Spanish conceptualizations of waste. How much can you really expect of them? You need a lot of time for scaffolding content. You need a lot of time for scaffolding Scalar skills. I think I addressed starting with the Scalar earlier on, even earlier than I started, is a way of rectifying this. But there's other options that are perhaps simpler if all you're going to do is what I was doing, which ended up being juxtaposing image and text and video and text. So WordPress, I think, would be an option. Google Book Creator, Pressbooks, as John's saying. I'm not even familiar with them. So I think Scalar is worthy of exploring as a teaching option, but it really needs to be for maybe a course with a focus on digital learning or a focus on digital publishing, and understanding what from the platform is really necessary, and if it could be, if you could get the same thing out of a simpler, more intuitive platform. And then my final thing, I know I'm running out of time, my final thing is that at the end of the semester, since I was thinking of this, like, so what? So why did we do this? I had them do a reflection where they basically had to explain to a user how to navigate the book and what the power of the book, what the power of navigating the glossary in that way really showed you. And a lot of them made a lot of comment about juxtaposition of image and text and the different connections and the web. So I think that was a good final assignment to get them to think, to reflect on Scalar as a platform. But I wouldn't say I would never do it again, but I learned a lot in this experience. So I have a couple of minutes if you have any questions. I know I went quickly because it's only 20 minutes. So thank you for listening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
I have to say, to take on something like a computer platform to teach an already difficult situation, kudos. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I almost thought maybe doing something different might get them excited, especially since it was digital and since we had this focus on digital online learning, that, hey, maybe this will be the semester to do this. And I would decidedly say, no, it was not the semester to do that. And yeah, I'm excited to see my reviews from this semester, because I think a lot of them did enjoy the class. Everyone was saying, this is so interesting, the subject matter is so interesting, but it was just adding something else to the equation, for sure.
Lots of cognitive load going on there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that's how all of our teaching moves forward, right? We try all kinds of stuff and we're like, oh, not that one.
Right. And Scalar is
way,
I think Scalar is a really interesting platform because of the power that it gives you to I have a hard time explaining it, because there's so many different possibilities for what you can do with it. You can annotate, if you can figure it out. You can draw things on from different archives on the web. It's really encouraging you to not use your own materials, but use what's already available on the internet, on the cloud. I spoke with another professor who had done it before, and she said that it was more successful in her course that was about digital humanities, because the students were really motivated to work on these ideas of digital humanities.
That's a good point.
I've been always afraid to try it in any class application. So I'm not afraid to try many things. But
really? You should have told me
Fiona
that.
had used it very successfully. So
yeah. So I mean, I can link you to the page. It was, it's just, I also think that with with online learning, I could only tell them to, especially when I was doing this asynchronous component, I would make these videos with quizzes in them and assignments afterwards. And I would go to the page and just be like, okay, I know you didn't watch the video. So at that point, it's hard to deal with. But like Rebecca says, yeah, in the lab setting, you can intervene in a much more natural manner.
Yeah, because it's not that, I mean, you can ask students to share their screen, but the benefit of being in a lab is when everyone's working on a digital project, you can see where they're at and where they might be struggling, and you can intervene, right? Because they might not even know they're having trouble. They might just think it's normal to like not know what button to click on.
Definitely.
But I had the same problem in my web design classes, where I would traditionally be in a lab setting, could see where everybody's at and see where everybody's stuck without them having to tell me. Right. But in the Zoom space, it's not as easy to do that without them actively kind of telling you where they're at with certain kinds of software. If you're doing things where you can use Google Slides or Google Sheets and you can see progress, right? Like that's one thing. But when they're working on other platforms where you can't see their progress, it's difficult.
Exactly. And also in the Spanish classroom, it's which student is willing to speak up and try to. And it's, I mean, it is a good language practice because you're using a vocabulary that, you know, you're probably not using. So I think that, thanks. I'm glad Flipgrid is much easier.
It is.
Flipgrid is like, make a video. So yeah, I like these types of projects. I'm actually next semester, I'm like, now I want to use ArcGIS story maps. So we'll see.
And you can embed that in,
then. Yeah.
in Scalar too.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you have so many things you can do with Scalar, but it's just, how do you explain it to another person? And you really realize who just has like a natural hack or you know, then the natural a knack for technology, and some of them are just very overwhelmed. So I think we think that this generation of students is like really technically savvy, but not for things that are not intuitive. They are not that savvy.
Catalina, one of the things that I've learned from teaching web design classes is how few interactions students actually have with websites. They tend to use apps more frequently. Like I ended up there was one class not too long ago, maybe 2 years ago. And at the end of the semester, like somehow it came out in conversation that like, we don't use websites, we use apps. And I was like, well, that explains why we were real confused all semester. So I retooled my like instruction to like, these are websites and these are how they're different than apps.
Wow.
Didn't even, and I also, so I'm an elder millennial, right? And I saw someone post online that they were like, I feel like the millennials had to learn how to use the internet, the elder ones. So you learn how to troubleshoot. And it's this ability to troubleshoot and to sort of like figure out websites that maybe this girl was like, I don't think that, our students are needing to troubleshoot as much. I don't know about that, but it is like a problem solving on the internet where I'm just like, click on every button, just click and find out what happens.
It's my life.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and
Exactly.
I have the reputation in my family of being the most technologically savvy, which is really funny because I'm not. I'm like, I'm fearless.
Yeah.
Somebody must have posted about this somewhere. Click, 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 click.
Scalar also scared me. So
that's a high bar.
You know, I found Scalar. I had to cancel annotations because I was going to have them annotate. I couldn't make it work. And I was just, if I can't make it work, then I'm not going to ask you to make it work. So it was, I mean, I just feel like I'm always sort of like flying by the seat of my pants with these courses, and then maybe the next time, and it would be easier if I were using Scalar again, but I don't plan on it anytime soon. So this might be like the anti-scalar presentation.
It might be just like you took on a tool that was like a little more complex for what you were really asking students to do. So something like WordPress or Pressbooks that's more geared towards like kind of creating single pages, and those single pages use tags that link to each other would eliminate like a couple of layers of complexity that Scalar has. But all the things you learned with Scalar are going to apply to using a tool like that.
Definitely. Yeah.
Pressbooks with hypothesis embedded to give you the tagging ability, I think would be a good way of doing it. Because then you'd have chapters and divisions, and it would be formatted as a book or an ebook.
It seems like a lot of these platforms have this tagging option. So really for me, the most interesting element was that web. And I think maybe I'm the only one who really cared about that web. I thought it was cool. But so was it worth it? That was like the whole time I was like, is this worth it? But I'm glad I did it to now know how I feel about it. But I will share the website. I'll share the link if you want to take a look. I'll just get it here. And SUNY Create, I don't know. I actually want to ask about SUNY Create. Is that still happening?
Yes, maybe. We hope. What happened is I wrote it up with 3 other people for an IATG grant that we were given. Ed Beck was a primary investigator on that from Oneonta. We got it, and then the funding, we had a tentative approval for last year as an ongoing project, and then all the funds were reallocated last year. So any of the money that was approved for IATG got canceled, and Oneonta funded it out of their OER budget when they still had one. That OER budget has disappeared. However, 2 people from OER services we had been meeting with the last 3 months, and we have a plan for it to continue at twice the scale that it was before, with the 4 campuses and maybe a couple of others being part of it, but that would all be funded by SUNY. The 2 people we've been working with who put the budget together, who submitted to the SUNY budget committee, and they were very optimistic that it would be funded, have both left. One took another job and the other retired in the last 3 weeks. So we are hoping that project will continue forward, because hiring is kind of slow there, and we lost our advocates at OER services. But the hope and the expectation is, I've talked to Mark about it, who is a director who's heavily involved in the program, at least. I don't know his formal title. He thinks it's going to go forward. So we'll know more within a month.
Okay. And my only other advocacy for the school in terms of access is, as someone who works with urban spaces, please get us Google Maps. Please, Google Maps. I guess incognito browser is the way around it.
It took 7 years to argue to get YouTube turned on. So we'll keep working on that. The issue is, again, partly SUNY, because the SUNY contract was only for the educational suite, and the SUNY lawyers are very reluctant to approve anything other than the official suite, although most campuses have turned on such things. So
it's really it's fascinating. I had never even thought, thank you. I had never even thought that it would be something that would be a privacy issue, but I guess it is a privacy issue, sort of.
In the contract for the Google Apps for Education, all the data is owned by SUNY, and there is no ads and there's no sharing of information. For all the other apps, it's governed by the terms that Google has, and they removed the "Don't be evil" from their plan there about 2 years ago now, and they do share their data pretty widely, and that's revealed in that long page of things you have to agree to when it gets approved. So with YouTube, it took a long time, and Rebecca helped with that, because I had been arguing it for years just because it was a really useful tool for classes. The accessibility features and the automatic transcription is what finally got CTS to turn that on. We'll keep working
ask for an
on Google
accessible map tool.
Good thought.
It would be nice. And some campuses are doing some really good things with map layers, and to have that, it's really helpful to have Google Maps enabled.
Great. Well, thank you.
Okay, well,
for-
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for coming to my presentation.
And thank you, Catalina.